I'm Maya, 18 years old, and I used to think birthdays were magical. That belief shattered when my parents convinced me to board their yacht for a surprise celebration, then abandoned me on a rocky outcrop in the middle of nowhere. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Mom called out as their boat disappeared into the horizon. "Consider this your graduation gift into the real world." What they didn't know was that their twisted lesson would become the catalyst for the life I was always meant to live. Growing up as the daughter of Marcus and Vivian Sterling meant existing in a world of pristine appearances and hollow achievements. My father built his fortune in tech consulting while my mother dominated the high-end interior design market, creating a lifestyle that looked perfect from the outside. Our waterfront mansion in an exclusive marina community impressed everyone who visited, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay and imported Italian marble throughout every room. What guests couldn't see was the emotional desert that existed beneath all that polished perfection. Birthdays in the Sterling household were never about celebration. When I turned 9, I spent weeks planning a pool party, carefully writing invitations, and helping our housekeeper Maria prepare decorations. The day arrived to find my parents had forgotten entirely, both claiming urgent business meetings that couldn't be postponed. I spent that afternoon alone by the pool, eating the cake Maria had secretly bought with her own money while my parents conducted conference calls from their respective home offices. "Birthdays are just another day, Maya," my mother explained when she found me crying later that evening. "The sooner you understand that life doesn't revolve around arbitrary dates, the better prepared you'll be for disappointment." By age 13, I'd stopped hoping for anything different. That year, my father left an envelope with $200 on my dresser while I was at school, along with a note suggesting I invest it wisely. My mother was in Milan for a design conference, sending a brief text message that simply read HBD, with no other acknowledgement. I spent that birthday at the local bookstore, buying novels that would transport me to worlds where people actually cared about each other. The pattern continued year after year. Minimal acknowledgement, maximum disappointment, followed by lectures about unrealistic expectations and the importance of self-reliance. The only person who ever made my birthday feel special was my best friend Zoe. She remembered every year without fail, often showing up at my door with handmade gifts that revealed how well she actually knew me: vintage vinyl records from bands I loved, art supplies that matched my evolving interests, or books by authors she'd heard me mention in passing. My 18th birthday approached with a familiar mixture of hope and preemptive disappointment. Despite everything, some foolish part of me believed this milestone might be different. Maybe they'd acknowledge that I was officially an adult now. Maybe they'd show some pride in the daughter they'd raised. 3 weeks before the date, I'd casually mentioned that Harbor Lights, a seafood restaurant downtown, had a special birthday menu that looked interesting. My mother had nodded absently while scrolling through fabric samples on her tablet. My father hadn't looked up from his financial reports at all. The tension in our house had escalated recently as college plans solidified. I'd been accepted to several universities for environmental science and marine biology, planning to study ocean conservation. My parents had different ideas: business school at an Ivy League institution, following a predetermined path to corporate success. "Environmental science won't build wealth," my father declared during one particularly heated dinner discussion. "Do you think we've worked this hard so you could waste your education on tree-hugging nonsense?" "It's not tree-hugging," I tried to explain. "Marine ecosystems are crucial for global stability. There are real career opportunities in environmental consulting, research, policy development." "Policy development," my mother interrupted with a dismissive laugh. "Wonderful. 4 years of college to become a bureaucrat making a teacher's salary." The argument ended as they always did, with my parents dismissing my passions as naive idealism and me retreating to my room, door closed against their disapproval. The morning of my 18th birthday arrived with the usual lack of fanfare. My mother was already gone when I came downstairs for breakfast, an early client meeting scheduled across town. My father sat at the kitchen island, typing rapidly on his laptop while drinking his morning espresso. I paused in the doorway, wondering if he'd remember the significance of the date. "The car's in the shop," he said without looking up. "You'll need to find your own way to school today." No birthday acknowledgement. Not even a good morning. I grabbed a piece of toast and my backpack, swallowing my disappointment along with the dry bread. Fine, I said. I'll walk. School passed in a blur of final exams and hollow birthday wishes from teachers who'd seen the date on their attendance rosters. Zoe, my one reliable source of birthday joy, texted me during lunch. Family emergency. Grandmother fell and broke her hip. At hospital with mom. Rain check on celebration? Love you. I texted back immediately, telling her not to worry about me and to focus on her family. But walking home alone that afternoon, I couldn't shake the heaviness settling over me. No Zoe, no celebration, just another birthday to endure until I could escape to college and build a life where I mattered to someone. I arrived home to an unusually quiet house. Typically, I could hear my mother's voice echoing from her design studio, the sharp professional tone she used for difficult clients, or the artificially warm one reserved for wealthy contacts she wanted to impress. Today, complete silence greeted me as I dropped my backpack by the front door. Mom? Dad? I called out, receiving no answer. I wandered into the kitchen, surprised to find it immaculate. Our housekeeper Maria only came on Mondays and Wednesdays, and this was Friday. Even more surprising was the note propped against the fruit bowl, written in my mother's precise handwriting. Be ready at 6 p.m. Wear something appropriate for the water. We have plans. I read the note 4 times, my heart performing an unwelcome flutter of hope. Plans on my birthday? This deviation from 18 years of established patterns felt too suspicious to trust. But I couldn't completely silence the tiny voice whispering that maybe, just maybe, they had remembered. After completing my homework, I stood before my closet for nearly 45 minutes, deliberating over what appropriate for the water meant in my mother's estimation. I finally settled on white jeans and a navy blue blouse she'd once said looked sophisticated, along with deck shoes and a light jacket. I spent extra time on my hair, and even applied makeup, hating myself a little for trying so hard to please them. At precisely 6 p.m., I descended the stairs to find both parents waiting in the foyer. My father wore khakis and a polo shirt, his casual sailing attire. My mother had changed into designer capri pants and a silk top from her yacht club appropriate collection. Both looked up as I approached, and I nearly stumbled at the unfamiliar sight of my mother's smile. Perfect timing, she said, her voice carrying an enthusiastic lilt I'd rarely heard directed at me. Marcus, doesn't she look lovely? My father nodded, his usual stern expression softened slightly. Very appropriate. Let's go. As we walked toward the marina, my father placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture so uncharacteristic I nearly flinched. We have something special planned, he said, his voice warm with what sounded like genuine affection. A birthday surprise you'll never forget. The rational part of my brain screamed warnings. This wasn't them. My parents didn't do surprises or special plans. They didn't smile at me or offer compliments or remember my birthday. But the desperate child still living inside me, the one who had blown out birthday candles year after year wishing for exactly this kind of parental attention, silenced those warnings. Where are we going? I asked as we approached their 40-foot yacht moored at the family slip. My mother reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a silk scarf. That's the surprise part, she said, holding up what I now recognized as a blindfold. You'll need to wear this until we reach our destination. I hesitated, uneasiness crawling up my spine. A blindfold? Is that really necessary? Don't you trust us? My father's voice carried an edge beneath the joviality. It's your birthday surprise, Maya. Play along. I acquiesced, allowing my mother to secure the soft fabric over my eyes. The world went dark as I felt their hands guiding me onto the yacht's deck. The familiar creaking of the boat and smell of salt air surrounded me as the engine started. All comfortable? My mother asked as we pulled away from the dock. Yes, I lied, feeling anything but comfortable. The silk blocked all light, leaving me completely dependent on them, a position that felt increasingly vulnerable. As the yacht moved through the water, the first 30 minutes seemed normal enough. I recognized the sounds of leaving the marina, the change in engine pitch as we entered open water, the familiar rhythm of our boat cutting through gentle swells. My parents maintained an unusual stream of pleasant conversation, occasionally including me with questions about school or comments about the beautiful evening weather. It was around the hour mark when I began to truly worry. Every destination I could think of, the yacht club, the nearby islands with restaurants, even the farthest swimming spots, was within 45 minutes of our marina. Where were they taking me? Are we going to Catalina Island? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. The popular tourist destination was about the only place that would require this long a journey. Just a bit further, my father replied, ignoring my question. Patience was never your strong suit. I felt the yacht slow and change direction several times, the motion becoming more pronounced, as if we were navigating around obstacles or through narrower waters. My stomach tightened with growing anxiety. The water feels different, I observed. Are we in a channel or something? Almost there, my mother said, her voice carrying an undertone I couldn't quite identify. Just a few more minutes. The yacht continued slowing, eventually coming to a complete stop. The engine cut off, leaving sudden silence broken only by the gentle lapping of waves against the hull and the sound of my parents moving around the deck. Ready for your surprise? My mother's voice came from directly in front of me. Without waiting for my response, I felt her fingers working at the blindfold's knot. The silk fell away, and I blinked against the late afternoon sunlight, my eyes struggling to adjust after the darkness. When my vision cleared, confusion gave way to dawning horror. We floated in a small cove beside what could barely be called an island, more like a large rocky outcrop maybe 100 yards across, covered with sparse vegetation and surrounded by choppy waters. No buildings, no dock, no other boats in sight. Just barren rock and scrub brush rising from the sea. I turned to my parents, uncomprehending, and froze at their expressions. My mother's pleasant smile had transformed into something cruel and satisfied. My father's face had hardened back into the cold mask I knew too well, but with an added element of malicious pleasure I'd never seen before. Surprise, my mother said, her voice dripping with mockery. You should see her face right now, my father added, his laughter sharp and cutting in the stillness of the isolated cove. Did you honestly think we'd planned a birthday celebration for you? I stood frozen, my mind struggling to process what was happening. The cold reality began seeping in, replacing the warmth of hope I'd foolishly allowed myself to feel. I don't understand, I managed to say, my voice sounding small even to my own ears. Why would you bring me here? My father stepped forward, his expression hardening further. Because you need to learn a lesson, Maya. You've been nothing but a disappointment to us, yet you walk around with this entitled attitude, expecting special treatment just because it's your birthday. Entitled? I echoed in disbelief. I barely asked for anything. I just mentioned a restaurant. There you go again, my mother interrupted, crossing her arms. Always making everything about you. Your father and I work tirelessly to provide you with advantages most kids would kill for. And all you do is complain and push against everything we try to do for your future. My father began pacing the yacht's deck like a prosecutor addressing a jury. Let's review your recent contributions, shall we? Rejecting the business internship we arranged for you. Embarrassing your mother at the yacht club dinner with your inappropriate comments about corporate environmental responsibility. Refusing to even consider the networking opportunities we've provided. And the constant sulking. The moody silences, my mother added. The closed door. The earbuds whenever we try to speak with you. Each accusation hit like a physical blow. The business internship had been 60 hours a week of unpaid filing at my father's consulting firm. The inappropriate comments had been politely disagreeing with a client who claimed environmental regulations hurt small businesses. The networking opportunities had been forced conversations with the entitled children of my parents' contacts, most of whom treated me like a commodity to be evaluated rather than a person to know. You think the world owes you celebration just for existing? My father continued. You think being our daughter entitles you to dictate your own future when we've already invested everything in your success? You've become such a spoiled, ungrateful brat, my mother said, pronouncing each word with deliberate cruelty. You thought we'd actually celebrate you after how you've been acting? I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly aware of how the late afternoon breeze was picking up, creating white caps on the water around us. So this is what? Some kind of punishment. My father smiled coldly. Think of it as a character-building exercise. A night alone might help you appreciate what you have and reconsider your attitude. The full meaning of his words crashed over me. You're leaving me here? Alone. Just overnight, my mother said with artificial lightness. We'll return in the morning. Consider it time to reflect on your behavior and priorities. Panic rose in my chest. You can't be serious. We're miles from anywhere. I don't have food, water, shelter. Always so dramatic, my mother sighed. The island has a natural freshwater spring. We scouted this location carefully. And contrary to what you might think, Marcus and I are monsters. We left some supplies in that waterproof bag. She pointed to a small dry bag sitting near the yacht's stern that I hadn't noticed before. This is insane, I said, my voice rising. This is child abandonment. You can't just leave me on a deserted island. My father's expression darkened. And there's the disrespect again. This attitude is exactly why we're doing this. One night alone with your thoughts might finally get through to you what 18 years of our guidance hasn't managed to accomplish. We've been planning this for months, my mother added with disturbing pride. Waiting for the right opportunity to show you some real-world consequences. Your 18th birthday seemed particularly fitting, a transition into adulthood. They began moving toward the yacht's controls, preparing to leave. I rushed forward, desperation taking hold. Wait, I called out. You can't leave me here. This is crazy. My father paused at the wheel, turning back. For one desperate moment, I thought he might be reconsidering. Instead, he reached into his pocket and tossed something that landed with a splash in the shallow water near the island's edge. A waterproof emergency beacon, he explained. In case of genuine emergency, medical crisis, severe weather, that sort of thing. The Coast Guard station is about 20 miles south, though I doubt you'll need it. You're always telling us how mature and independent you are. Here's your chance to prove it. With that, he started the engine. I rushed to the yacht's edge, reaching for the ladder, but my mother pulled it up the moment I approached. Through the cockpit window, I saw my father's satisfied expression as the yacht began pulling away. See you in the morning, birthday girl, my mother called out over the engine noise. Enjoy your surprise. I stood waist-deep in the cold water, watching their boat recede across the cove until it disappeared around a rocky point, leaving me truly alone. The silence that followed seemed deafening. No traffic sounds, no human voices, just the constant lapping of waves and the cry of seabirds overhead. The reality of my situation hit me all at once. I had no phone. It had been in my purse, which remained on the yacht. No food except whatever provisions my parents claimed to have left. No real shelter on this barren outcrop. Nothing but the clothes I wore and an emergency beacon I was supposed to save for life-threatening situations. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Crying wouldn't help me now. Instead, I waded to shore and retrieved the waterproof bag, then began examining my surroundings with practical eyes. The island was roughly oval-shaped, maybe 300 feet at its widest point. Rocky shoreline gave way to sandy patches and areas of coarse grass. A few hardy shrubs and one twisted tree provided minimal vegetation. At the island's highest point, about 30 feet above sea level, a cluster of larger rocks created a natural windbreak. Opening the dry bag revealed my parents' idea of survival supplies. 2 bottles of water, a package of granola bars, a thin emergency blanket, a flashlight, and a basic first aid kit. Enough to keep me alive for 24 hours, but hardly comfortable accommodations. As evening approached, I explored more thoroughly, discovering the freshwater spring my mother had mentioned. It emerged from a crack in the rocks near the island's center, creating a small pool of clear, cold water. Testing it cautiously, it tasted clean and fresh, probably the only genuinely helpful thing my parents had told me. With basic needs assessed, I climbed to the island's highest point to survey my surroundings. Open ocean stretched in every direction, broken only by distant rocky outcrops that might be other small islands. No boats, no signs of human activity, nothing but endless water under the slowly darkening sky. The temperature began dropping as the sun sank toward the horizon. I gathered dried seaweed and driftwood to create a simple windbreak near the rocks, then wrapped myself in the emergency blanket. The metallic material reflected body heat, but felt impossibly thin against the growing cold. As darkness claimed the island, transforming it into a small bubble of existence surrounded by vast black water, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. My own parents had planned for months to abandon me in a dangerous, isolated location, using my 18th birthday as the perfect opportunity to maximize my pain. They had smiled while doing it, taken satisfaction in my fear and confusion. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a punishment conceived in anger. This was calculated cruelty designed specifically to hurt me as deeply as possible. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The hurt and fear didn't disappear, but they were joined by something stronger, a burning anger that spread through my chest and hardened into resolve. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of finding me broken tomorrow, and I would never, ever forget what they had done. Night settled completely around the island, bringing with it a chill that seeped through my clothes and the inadequate emergency blanket. The darkness was absolute. No city lights, no neighboring boats, nothing but starlight reflecting off the surrounding water. The sounds changed too, transitioning from evening bird calls to the splash of fish jumping and the distant calls of night-hunting seabirds. I switched on the flashlight, grateful for this small mercy. Its beam cut through the darkness, illuminating my rocky shelter in harsh relief. The island looked even more desolate in this focused light. Jagged rocks, patches of sand, sparse vegetation struggling to survive in the salt air. "Focus, Maya," I whispered to myself, needing to hear a human voice even if it was my own. "You need a plan." My first priority was improving my shelter for the long night ahead. The emergency blanket was better than nothing, but the ocean breeze cut right through it. Using the flashlight, I gathered larger pieces of driftwood to create more substantial windbreaks around my position. I found several pieces of plastic debris, probably trash washed ashore from passing boats, that could serve as additional wind protection. The work kept me warm temporarily, but as the night deepened, the cold became more pronounced. I'd read somewhere that ocean temperatures stayed relatively constant, but air temperatures over water could drop 20 to 30 degrees from day to night. My appropriate for water outfit provided minimal protection against sustained cold. With my immediate survival needs addressed as best as possible, I allowed myself to think beyond this night. My parents expected to return in the morning to find me frightened, humbled, and ready to comply with their demands. The thought of giving them that satisfaction made my stomach turn. I looked up at the clear night sky, identifying constellations I remembered from astronomy class. The North Star stood steady above the horizon, and with careful observation, I could orient myself using the surrounding star patterns. Based on the sun's position when they'd left and the current star configuration, I estimated we were somewhere southwest of our home marina. My father had mentioned the Coast Guard station was 20 miles south. If I could somehow signal a passing boat or aircraft, I might not have to wait for my parents' return. The emergency beacon felt heavy in my pocket, a last resort that might bring help but would also confirm to my parents that I couldn't handle their lesson. As I sat planning, that same cold anger from earlier began building again. My parents had orchestrated this cruel abandonment with meticulous care. They'd scouted the location in advance, prepared minimal supplies, even chosen my 18th birthday specifically to maximize the emotional damage. This wasn't a spontaneous act of frustration, it was premeditated abuse. "They want to teach me a lesson," I whispered to the darkness. "But they're the ones who need to learn." I began formulating a plan not just for surviving the night, but for what would happen after. For 18 years, I'd endured their emotional neglect, believing somewhere deep down that I deserved it or that all parents treated their children this way. This incident had shattered those illusions completely. What they had done wasn't normal parental discipline. It was criminal abandonment and endangerment. As midnight approached, Exhaustion began to overtake me despite my anxiety and the persistent cold. I arranged my makeshift shelter, positioning the flashlight nearby in case I needed it during the night. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by unfamiliar sounds and the constant chill that seeped through my inadequate bedding. I woke before dawn, stiff and shivering, but filled with determination. The island looked less threatening in the early morning light, its dangers diminished by pale sunshine beginning to warm the rocks. I folded the emergency blanket carefully and returned the supplies to the dry bag, leaving everything exactly as my parents had arranged it. Let them think I'd never touched their provisions. Stepping to the island's edge, I studied my surroundings with clear eyes. The water was calmer now, gentle swells replacing the choppy waves of yesterday evening. To the east, I could make out what appeared to be a larger landmass in the far distance, probably part of the mainland coast. Before my parents returned, I decided to explore the island more thoroughly. Around the far side, partially hidden by an outcrop of rocks, I discovered something that changed my situation entirely: the remains of an old wooden pier, mostly rotted away, but with several posts still visible at low tide. This island hadn't always been uninhabited. Someone had built infrastructure here once, which meant it was accessible by boat and possibly known to local fishermen or recreational boaters. I'd walked perhaps halfway around the island's perimeter when the distant sound of an engine reached my ears. I froze, momentarily wondering if my parents had returned early. But the sound was different, rougher, more working class than their yacht's smooth purr. The boat that eventually came into view was a weathered fishing vessel, not my parents' pristine pleasure craft. It slowed as it approached, and a sun-weathered man with graying hair peered at me from the wheelhouse. "Well, I'll be damned," he called out, his voice carrying clearly across the water. "What's a young lady doing out here, all by herself?" "I need help," I called back, my voice cracking with emotion at this first human contact. "I was left here yesterday. My name is Maya." The man's expression shifted from curiosity to immediate concern. "Left here? By who?" I hesitated, the truth momentarily catching in my throat. "My parents. As a punishment. Yesterday was my 18th birthday." His weathered face hardened with understanding and outrage. "Get in this boat right now," he said, maneuvering closer to shore. "I'm Captain Tom Rodriguez. That island you're on is called Gull Rock, and nobody gets left there by accident." Captain Rodriguez's fishing boat felt like salvation itself, warm, solid, and most importantly, moving away from my island prison. He'd insisted I sit in the heated wheelhouse while he prepared hot coffee and called someone on his radio. "Coast Guard Station Los Angeles. This is fishing vessel Maria Elena," he said into the microphone. "I've got a situation here that needs immediate attention. Found a young woman abandoned on Gull Rock. Says her parents left her there as punishment." The radio crackled with response, and Captain Rodriguez provided our coordinates and details. Within minutes, arrangements were made to meet a Coast Guard cutter that would transport me back to the mainland and begin an official investigation. As we waited for the Coast Guard, Captain Rodriguez encouraged me to tell him what had happened. His expression grew increasingly stormy as I detailed my parents' birthday deception and abandonment. "I've been fishing these waters for 30 years, he said when I finished. "Gull Rock isn't a place anyone accidentally finds themselves. Your parents knew exactly what they were doing. That's attempted murder as far as I'm concerned." The Coast Guard cutter arrived within an hour, its official presence making the situation feel suddenly real and serious. I was transferred to their vessel, where a female officer named Lieutenant Sarah Chen took my statement while the boat headed back to their station. "We'll need to notify local police immediately," Lieutenant Chen explained. "What your parents did constitutes multiple felonies: child endangerment, reckless abandonment, and potentially kidnapping, since they transported you against your will to an isolated location." "I don't want to make things worse," I said weakly, still processing the reality of my situation. Lieutenant Chen's expression softened. "Maya, this isn't about making things worse. This is about preventing them from hurting you or anyone else again. What they did was criminal, period." At the Coast Guard station, I repeated my statement to local police detectives while victim advocates explained my rights and options. The whole process felt surreal, transforming from a frightened girl on a rock to a victim of federal crimes in the span of a few hours. I had just finished giving my formal statement when the station erupted with the sound of my mother's voice.
Where is she?
Where is my daughter? We've been searching everywhere since our yacht broke down last night. Through the window, I could see my parents at the front desk, my mother in a theatrical display of maternal distress. My father stood beside her with his lawyer's expression firmly in place, already spinning the narrative. They're lying already, I whispered to Detective Maria Santos, who had been taking my statement. They said they'd come back for me this morning. There was no breakdown. Detective Santos's expression hardened. Let them lie. It only makes their position worse. My parents were escorted to separate interview rooms, but not before my mother caught sight of me through the window. Her performance of concerned parent instantly transformed into a flash of cold anger before she could compose herself again. That brief glimpse of her true feelings strengthened my resolve. Your parents are claiming you jumped overboard during a family birthday outing, Detective Santos informed me after conferring with her colleagues. They say you were upset about college plans and disappeared while they were anchoring for dinner. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. That's their story? That I jumped overboard in the middle of nowhere wearing street clothes and somehow swam to an island miles away. It's not a particularly credible account, Detective Santos agreed dryly. But we need to build a solid case. Do you have any evidence of what really happened? A thought struck me, a memory from the boat ride. My phone, I said suddenly. I have an app one uses for voice memos. I turned it on when they blindfolded me because something felt wrong. It might have recorded everything. Detective Santos immediately contacted the Coast Guard team that had searched my parents' yacht. Within an hour, they'd located my phone and purse, exactly where I'd left them in the yacht's cabin. The wait was excruciating. Zoe had been contacted and was on her way with her parents, who'd insisted on providing support despite their own family crisis. A victim advocate named Patricia explained legal procedures while we waited for the police to analyze the phone's contents. Finally, Detective Santos returned with her supervisor, Lieutenant David Park. Their expressions told me everything I needed to know. We've reviewed the audio recording, Lieutenant Park stated. It clearly contradicts your parents' version of events and corroborates your statement. We've separated them for further questioning and informed them both that they're facing serious federal charges. What happens now? I asked, the reality of the situation finally hitting me fully. That depends partly on you, Patricia explained gently. You're 18, which means you're legally an adult, but you're also a victim of serious crimes. Do you have any relatives who might be willing to help while this legal process unfolds? I thought about our limited family connections. My father had a brother, Uncle James, whom I hadn't seen in years due to some business disagreement. They'd had a falling out when I was 14, and contact had been minimal since then. But I remembered him as warmer than my parents, with a sense of humor they completely lacked. My Uncle James, I suggested hesitantly. My father's brother. They don't speak much, but he was always kind to me when I was younger. Patricia nodded. We'll try to locate him. In the meantime, you'll need temporary housing. The Coast Guard has protocols for situations like this. She can stay with us, came a familiar voice from the doorway. Zoe burst into the room, followed by her parents Michael and Susan, all looking worried and determined. We drove straight here when we got the call, Susan said, immediately enveloping me in a fierce hug. You're not going through this alone. The next few hours passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and arrangements. My parents were being held pending bail hearings, with prosecutors arguing they posed a flight risk given the premeditated nature of their actions. I was officially placed in temporary care with Zoe's family, while authorities attempted to locate Uncle James. As we finally left the Coast Guard station that evening, exhaustion overtook the adrenaline that had kept me functioning all day. In the back seat of the Morris family car, with Zoe's reassuring presence beside me, I allowed myself to process a painful truth. My life had irrevocably changed in the span of 48 hours. My 18th birthday had become the dividing line between before and after, between the girl who still hoped for parental love and the woman who now had to build a life despite their betrayal. The days following my abandonment unfolded with bewildering speed. My parents were formally charged with kidnapping, child endangerment, reckless abandonment, and several maritime safety violations. Their initial court appearance was a surreal experience, watching the two people who had shaped my entire existence being treated as criminals. Their carefully cultivated images as successful professionals crumbled under media scrutiny. Local news picked up the story with headlines like "Prominent tech executive and designer charged with abandoning daughter on deserted island," creating a spectacle I wasn't prepared to handle. They both posted bail, but with strict conditions: no contact with me, surrender of their passports, and regular check-ins with court officers. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Williams, made her disgust clear during the hearing. The calculated nature of these actions, using the victim's 18th birthday as an opportunity for maximum emotional damage, demonstrates a level of cruelty that defies comprehension, she stated. This court takes these charges extremely seriously. Living with Zoe's family provided a startling contrast to my own home environment. The Morris household operated with casual warmth I'd never experienced, spontaneous hugs, genuine interest in each other's daily lives, family dinners filled with conversation and laughter rather than performance. At first, I felt like an outsider observing a foreign culture, unable to participate naturally in their easy affection. Gradually, however, I began to understand that this, not my parents' cold perfection, was normal family life. The most unexpected development came 2 weeks after the incident when Uncle James arrived from Portland, where he built a successful architecture practice specializing in sustainable design. I barely recognized the man who embraced me in Zoe's living room. His resemblance to my father was evident in facial structure, but his warm expression and genuine emotion created a completely different impression. "I should have stayed in touch," he said, holding my hands tightly after our initial embrace. I knew Marcus and Vivian were cold people, but I had no idea it was this bad. "I'm so sorry, Maya." James had immediately filed for emergency guardianship upon learning what had happened, offering me a home with his family in Oregon. His wife Elena and their 2 children, my cousins I barely knew, had sent video messages welcoming me if I chose to come. "There's no pressure," James assured me. "You might prefer to stay here with your friend until college starts, or you might want a completely fresh start. The choice is entirely yours." That he offered me a choice at all, that my preference actually mattered to him, felt revolutionary. While the legal case proceeded, I began sessions with Dr. Rachel Kim, a psychologist specializing in family trauma and abuse. In her comfortable office filled with plants and natural light, I slowly unpacked the patterns of emotional neglect that had defined my childhood. "What your parents did on the island was extreme," Dr. Kim explained, "but it sounds like it was an escalation of established patterns, not an isolated incident." Through our sessions, I began recognizing the subtle forms of emotional abuse I'd normalized: the constant criticism disguised as concern, the withdrawal of affection as punishment, the dismissal of my interests and dreams as childish fantasies. "I always thought I was the problem," I admitted during one particularly difficult session. "If I were smarter or more accomplished or just better somehow, they would love me properly." Dr. Kim's expression softened with compassion. "The fundamental truth you need to understand, Maya, is that their behavior reflects their deficiencies, not yours. Healthy parents don't withhold love based on performance. The inability to love unconditionally is their failure, not yours." As spring progressed toward summer, unexpected support emerged from surprising sources. My high school marine biology teacher, Dr. Amanda Foster, had submitted my research project on ocean acidification to several environmental organizations, resulting in a substantial scholarship from the National Marine Conservation Society. My father's former business partner, Robert Chin, reached out through proper legal channels to offer a character witness statement, revealing he'd left the consulting firm partly due to concerns about my father's treatment of me during a "Bring Your Daughter to Work" event years earlier. Most surprising was the quiet support from neighbors I'd barely interacted with. The Hendersons from next door dropped off home-cooked meals for the Morris family. Mrs. Catherine Walsh, who lived across the street, organized a gift card collection to help with my expenses. Mr. David Park, a retired marine biologist who lived at the end of our block, offered mentorship and connections to marine research programs. We suspected something wasn't right in that house, Mrs. Walsh admitted when she delivered the gift cards. The way they spoke about you at community events, but we never imagined it was this serious. We should have done more. The prosecutor handling my parents' case, District Attorney Jennifer Martinez, met with me regularly to prepare for possible trial testimony. She was direct but compassionate, never sugarcoating the challenges ahead while always affirming my courage. Your voice matters in this process, she emphasized. The audio recording is powerful evidence, but your testimony about the pattern of behavior will help establish the full context of what happened. As summer arrived, I made my decision. I would move to Portland to live with Uncle James after graduation. The prospect of distance from the memories and media attention felt increasingly necessary for healing. Zoe cried when I told her, but immediately promised regular video calls and summer visits. You deserve a fresh start, she said fiercely. But don't think for a second you're getting rid of me as your best friend. In July, just after my high school graduation ceremony that my uncle attended with tears of pride, my parents' case reached its resolution. Facing overwhelming evidence and DA Martinez's skillful case-building, they accepted a plea deal rather than risk a public trial. The terms included significant jail time, probation, mandatory therapy, community service, and permanent records that would impact both their professional licenses. The final hearing required my presence for a victim impact statement. Walking into that courtroom marked the first time I'd seen my parents since that night at the Coast Guard station. My mother looked diminished somehow, her customary polished appearance showing signs of strain. My father's confident posture had crumbled, his shoulders hunched as if carrying invisible weight. Neither would meet my eyes directly. Judge Williams invited me to make a victim impact statement if I wished. Standing at the podium, facing the court and my parents, I found strength I didn't know I possessed. What hurts most isn't what happened on that island, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. It's understanding that moment was the culmination of a lifetime of emotional neglect disguised as parenting. I used to think if I just achieved more, complained less, or tried harder to be perfect, I would finally earn the love that should have been unconditional. I looked directly at my parents for the first time. I understand now that wasn't possible, not because I was unworthy, but because you were incapable of giving it. I'm not speaking today to punish you further. I'm speaking because for 18 years, my voice didn't matter in our family. Today, it does. And I want the record to show that despite everything, I'm going to thrive. Not because of your parenting, but despite it. Judge Williams's sentencing remarks were pointed and unsparing. To use a child's milestone birthday as an opportunity to inflict maximum emotional and physical danger demonstrates a profound failure, not just as parents, but as human beings, she stated. This court cannot sentence you to become better people, but it can ensure consequences for your actions and protection for your daughter. As we left the courthouse, reporters called out questions that DA Martinez deflected expertly. Uncle James's protective arm around my shoulders guided me through the crowd to his waiting car. Tomorrow, we would fly to Portland to begin my new life with his family. My belongings, those I wanted to keep, had already been packed and shipped. The task of entering my childhood home to collect them had been undertaken by Zoe and her mother to spare me the experience. That evening, during a quiet farewell dinner with the Morris family and a few supportive teachers, my school counselor handed me an envelope. This came to the guidance office for you, she explained. It's been reviewed by your lawyer and approved for you to read if you choose. Inside was a letter from my mother, the first communication since that night permitted through proper legal channels. Her handwriting, usually precise, showed uncharacteristic shakiness. Maya, there are no words adequate to address what we did or the years leading to it. I won't insult you with excuses or empty apologies. I can only say that losing you has forced me to confront truths about myself I've spent a lifetime avoiding. The therapy the court mandated has begun showing me how profoundly I failed you, repeating patterns from my own childhood I never addressed. This is not an attempt to re-enter your life. You deserve the fresh start with James and his family. But I wanted you to know that your words in court reached me. Your strength humbled me. And though I have no right to feel it, I am proud of the remarkable young woman you've become. Not because of me, but as you rightly said, despite me. Vivian. I folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope, unsure how to feel about this first acknowledgement of wrongdoing. It wasn't forgiveness I felt, that might come someday or it might not. It was something else. Validation that what happened had been real, that even she couldn't deny the truth of it anymore. Are you okay? Zoe asked softly. I looked around the table at these people who had shown me what real support and care looked like. Zoe and her parents who had opened their home without hesitation, my teachers who had protected my education and advocated for my future, Uncle James who had traveled across the country to offer me family. Yes, I answered truthfully. For the first time in my life, I think I really am. For years can transform everything. At 22, sitting in my university apartment overlooking Portland's Willamette River, surrounded by marine biology textbooks and half-finished environmental policy papers, I barely recognized the frightened 18-year-old girl abandoned on that island. The mirror reflects someone stronger now, a young woman with purpose in her eyes and confidence in her posture that once seemed impossible. My journey didn't end with that courtroom or the flight to Portland. In many ways, it was just beginning. Living with Uncle James, Aunt Elena, and my cousins Marcus and Sophia taught me what healthy family relationships look like. Disagreements resolved through conversation rather than cold silence. Achievements celebrated without conditional expectations. Love expressed openly without fear of withdrawal. Families aren't perfect, Elena told me during my first week in their home, after I'd apologized profusely for accidentally breaking a mug. We make mistakes, we forgive, we move forward together. That's what makes it work. College at Oregon State brought new challenges and opportunities. I double majored in marine biology and environmental policy, combining my passion for ocean conservation with practical skills for creating change. My senior thesis project, a comprehensive study of microplastic impact on Pacific Coast marine ecosystems, won university recognition and was published in an undergraduate research journal. The healing process wasn't linear. Certain triggers could instantly transport me back to that island. The sound of boat engines in the distance, unexpected changes in plans, the particular quality of late afternoon light over water. Dr. Sarah Martinez, my therapist in Portland, helped me develop coping strategies for these moments. Recovery isn't about never feeling pain again, she explained. It's about having the tools to move through it rather than being trapped by it. During my sophomore year, I founded a support group for students who had experienced family trauma or estrangement. What began as informal coffee meetings evolved into an officially recognized campus organization providing resources, community, and advocacy. Through this work, I discovered my calling, using my experience to help others rebuild their sense of self and family after similar betrayals. Zoe remained my anchor through everything. Despite the physical distance, our friendship never wavered. She visited every summer, and I returned to California during her college breaks, each visit easier than the last as new memories gradually overlaid the painful ones. The most difficult decision came during my junior year when my father requested a meeting through proper legal channels. After extensive consultation with Dr. Martinez and considerable reflection, I agreed to see him at a neutral location with Uncle James present. The man who entered the coffee shop looked markedly different from the controlling father I remembered. For years had aged him considerably, etching new lines around his eyes and mouth. He sat stiffly across from me, Uncle James's steady presence providing silent support. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," my father began, his voice lacking its former authoritative edge. "Why did you want this meeting?" I asked directly, no longer the child afraid to question him. He looked down at his untouched coffee. "I've been in intensive therapy for 3 years now, not just the court-mandated sessions but voluntary treatment. My therapist suggested that offering you a genuine apology might be important for both of us, though she emphasized you have no obligation to accept it." What followed was something I'd never witnessed from him: vulnerability. He spoke of his own emotionally barren childhood, the pressure to achieve and appear successful, the absence of healthy relationship models in his upbringing. He acknowledged using me as an extension of himself rather than seeing me as an independent person deserving unconditional love. "None of this excuses what we did to you," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "There is no justification for such cruelty. I can only tell you that I understand now the damage I caused, and I live with that knowledge every day." I didn't offer forgiveness. That wasn't something I could honestly give yet. Instead, I thanked him for the apology and wished him well with his continued therapy. As we parted, he handed me an envelope. "Your portion of your grandmother's trust fund," he explained. "It was always meant to be yours at 21, but we had been controlling it. It's yours now, completely." The substantial sum provided unexpected financial security as I planned my post-graduation life, but more valuable was the closure these interactions provided. Not reconciliation, but acknowledgement of wrongs done and consequences accepted. My relationship with Uncle James deepened from guardian and ward to something genuinely paternal. He attended my college graduation with tears of pride, framed my first published research paper, and taught me to sail on the Columbia River during long weekend afternoons that became our bonding ritual. "Family is who shows up," he told me once while we cleaned his sailboat after a particularly enjoyable day on the water. "Not just in emergencies, but in ordinary moments. It's built through thousands of small kindnesses, not legal documents or blood connections." Aunt Elena became the mother figure I'd never truly had, offering quiet wisdom and unconditional support without demands or expectations. My cousins accepted me seamlessly into their family dynamic, treating me as the sister they'd never had rather than the traumatized relative who'd arrived in crisis. This year, on my 22nd birthday, I experienced a celebration that would have seemed impossible to my 18-year-old self. No grand gestures or expensive gifts, just a gathering of people who truly cared. Uncle James and Elena, my cousins, Zoe, who flew up specially, university friends, and members of my support group who had become chosen family. We ate homemade cake on James and Elena's back deck overlooking the river, sharing stories and laughter until late evening. No one needed to make my birthday special through elaborate performances of affection. It was special because I was loved for exactly who I am, not who someone else wanted me to be. The island incident, as I've come to call it, no longer defines me. It shaped me, certainly, led me to marine biology, to advocacy work, to creating support systems for others with similar wounds. But it's just one chapter in a continuing story, not the entire narrative. I've learned that family can be rebuilt from the ground up, chosen carefully, and nurtured intentionally. I've discovered that the capacity to trust again isn't destroyed by betrayal, but can be restored through consistent, authentic care from others. Most importantly, I've realized that the measure of our lives isn't found in our worst moments or deepest wounds, but in how we transform them into wisdom, compassion, and purpose. My name is Maya, and my story didn't end on that island on my 18th birthday. In many ways, that's where it truly began. Looking ahead, I'm starting graduate school in the fall, pursuing a master's degree in marine conservation policy. My thesis will focus on creating support systems for young environmental advocates who face family rejection for their career choices. Uncle James has offered to help me establish a nonprofit organization to provide scholarships and mentorship for students in similar situations. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Captain Rodriguez hadn't found me that morning, if I'd waited for my parents to return as they'd planned. Would I have emerged from that experience broken and compliant, ready to follow their predetermined path? I'll never know, and I'm grateful for that uncertainty. The life I'm building now, surrounded by chosen family, pursuing work that matters to me, helping others heal from similar trauma, feels authentic in a way my previous existence never did. The ocean, which once represented abandonment and terror, has become my passion and profession. I spend my summers doing research on marine protected areas, my hands in tide pools and my feet on boat decks, turning the source of my trauma into the foundation of my purpose. Sometimes, during quiet moments on research vessels, I think about that scared girl on Gull Rock. I wish I could tell her that everything would work out, that the pain would transform into strength, that she would find the family she always deserved. But maybe she already knew, somewhere deep down, that surviving that night was just the beginning of becoming who she was meant to be. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that eventually led to discovering your true family and purpose? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more stories of resilience and transformation. And if you know someone who might need to hear that healing is possible after family trauma, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my journey. May it bring some hope to those still finding their way through their own storms.